Plants vs Zombies 3 just had another soft launch, so naturally I had to give this game a go and see if it still has some redeeming qualities after all. Disclaimer: this video was originally supposed to be a guide on how to beat the entire adventure, but while playing through all the levels I realized that the game itself had some fundamental flaws. But I also didn't want this video to be yet another PvZ3 slander. You see, I love PvZ way too much, and because I have this amount of respect towards the entire franchise, I will instead focus on a constructive critique on my side, from the perspective of somebody who's played this game for well over 13 years now. Also, keep in mind that everything I say here is completely subjective and you may or may not agree with what I say, so don't take everything I say as an objective claim. Alright, we start off with the things I enjoy about this game. So, firstly, them going back to the landscape compared to the portrait mode was a really smart move in my opinion. The columns to rows ratio feels right again and I feel more committed to the game now while playing as a result. It also makes for a much better format for us content creators to create content on, since portrait mode on mobile games are usually only good for YouTube shorts. I also personally like the 1 sun meta this game offers instead of the traditional 25 or 50 sun meta. It offers a much cleaner gameplay experience in my opinion. In addition, they reverted some plan changes they've had done in the past. Sunflower doesn't cost 1 anymore and pea shooter doesn't cost 3 sun, which I really like personally. Problem with the 25 costs Sunflower essentially is that spamming them simply as cannon fodder just becomes too easy, making the game lack some serious strategizing. Another thing I need to praise PopCap for is for adding some very interesting and cool mechanics to some of the maps. Like literally, I'm a huge fan of puddles, water and the heights on the roof levels. They're executed really well and they're also interesting mechanics that add some deeper strategy to the game. Having a different lawnmower compared to the previous titles is also really interesting. Now you're not able to brainlessly let your lawnmowers take care of the final wave, but instead you only get 1 chance at correcting your error when messing up. I also like how they changed Ducky Tube Zombie in this game. Instead of slowing down in the water, they instead become a lot faster, but they're also slower on land to compensate. This is a much more interesting approach than just having them be retextured versions of basic zombies. I also like how you're rewarded with this nice greystone and flowers animation screen at the very end of a level. I personally think it's executed quite well and it also makes earning these coins a lot more enjoyable. I also love the fact they've made plenty of references to all the titles. You see the return of Plantain and Hypnoshroom in forms of decoration in the game, which is a nice little Easter egg that also enhances the overall PvZ feeling this game has. Some of the plant choices are really great. I love to see both Lightning Reed and Umbrella Leaf make a return to this game. And especially Umbrella Leaf got a whole lot more interesting now. Instead of just permanently shutting down each zombie type, they instead wear down over time, which adds to the complexity of your strategy, since now you have to make more micro decisions in game. And come on guys, even the best plan in this entire franchise has made a return. I mean, just look at how handsome he looks. 10 bonus points for that. Okay, jokes aside, now we'll transition to the critique I have about this game. If you're someone who can't listen to any sort of criticism about your favorite video game franchise, then you should consider leaving this video now. For everyone who's still around here, I quickly just want to say that none of these points are meant to harass or mock anyone. Instead, they're just my piece of personal advice towards the game. Alright, we begin with the most obvious things, so firstly, I'm not enjoying the art style choice that was made here. It seems that with each game iteration they try to get a more child-friendly cartoonish style, which again is something completely subjective to me, so I won't be beating on it too much. But in addition, the animations in the game also just look awful. I'm ignoring the visual glitches this game has, since that can be ignored considering the game is only in its early access. But the animations just look so horrendous. Look at Bonk Choy or any zombie eating anything. Even Gigantua looks very skinny and just goofy as fuck now. My point is that nothing in this game is visually pleasing for me to look at, other than maybe the decorations you get from the story mode. The touchscreen and also the dragging feels really janky for some reason. The plants don't feel as responsive, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, moving on to another thing that's personally bothering me is that PopCap is only choosing to release PvZ3 as a mobile game, sort of making it available to PC as well as console players. I know a lot of people who would love to play their favorite tower defense game on a PC again, but at the end of the day, it's PopCap's choice what business model they choose, and if they're going for the mobile platform, that's probably because it's the most successful one. With that, I was also disappointed to see the ranked leaderboard system implemented in the game with no real multiplayer mode to back it up. This is something that was also bothering me in the iteration of PvZ3 back when it was in its alpha state. And I know a lot of mobile games have this feature, but can we just please take a moment and think about how enjoyable a real-time multiplayer mode would be? Especially if this game was also released on PCs and consoles with an included cross-platform multiplayer. A lot of companies already have this feature, and I'm convinced that opening a new competitive site within the PvZ community would be really healthy for the long-term success of the game. But it seems that PopCap is only appealing to the younger audience, which is a much more casually oriented one. And to be fair to them, they probably make most of their money off of children watching their ads, considering the popularity of the child-focused PvZ hack content that's spread all across over YouTube. I also don't like the approach PopCap is trying to do with copying other successful business models inside the mobile game industry. Like the first alpha of PvZ3 was just a straight up copy from Clash Royale. And then they received a massive backlash from people like Danaraid who spoke up for the community, and they changed the game to a copy of Gardenscape instead. PvZ3, especially with its title, should only try to be PvZ and nothing else. You are probably also aware that they've released a PvZ match game a while back, which copies a lot of popular mobile games in the mobile game market. But I actually don't have a big problem with that game. I've also never played it, to be quite honest, but you see, the biggest difference here is that it's not trying to be something it's not. I mean, the name literally says it all, it's a match 3 game but in a PvZ style. PvZ3, however, is pretending to be on the same level as the predecessors. My point being is that when you're willingly naming your next game Plants vs Zombies 3, then it will generate very high expectations due to how good PvZ1 and even PvZ2 was before the leveling system was introduced. Sadly, it doesn't even come close to what was once the game of the year. There will also be a pig dog later in the story. Just... why? Look, I see what they're trying to do here, but this just feels out of place for any PvZ game. Oh well. We'll transition over to the gameplay part of this video. Okay, firstly, the level balancing is just executed very poorly here. Some levels barely require any input to beat, while others are almost impossible without the use of power-ups, which makes me question if the creators even have playtested their levels. The difficulty is just all over the place and there's no clear pattern, and what also has no clear pattern are the maps we are introduced to. Seriously, there's no clear transition to a specific world, which just creates a whole mess. On top of that, the night levels, while looking cool on the surface, are a whole nother problem in itself. Some floors produce sun way too slow, and if you get unlucky with your early game zombie spawns, you're almost guaranteed to lose and there's nothing you can do about it. The levels feel very short and repetitive, and 150 levels are just way too many with how little content this game offers. You barely unlock any new plants or zombies. I mean, I've completed the entire adventure mode in about 13 hours. And what was the reward for all of that hard work? Well, just 10 zombies and 12 new plants in total, which, by the way, none of them are actually new. They're all plants from previous titles. Also, many levels are straight up unfair and almost force you into using power-ups, which is just another problem in itself. Why can't I use cherry bomb jalapenos and chili pepper without having to grind or spend money on them? This doesn't help the repetitive nature of this game at all, and honestly it just feels like a bad business model in itself. They even offer you very bad deals when it comes to power-ups. A much better approach in my opinion would be to simply add customizable shop items. I think a lot more people would get to spend their money with that, instead of gatekeeping new players from the game by having impossibly hard levels that also need purchasable store items in order to beat. But that's not all. The game doesn't even allow you to choose your own seed slots, which makes for a very linear gameplay experience. I can't stress to you how repetitive this entire experience has felt to me. There's no special gimmick like plant food or taco here, there's no zombies fight or any boss whatsoever. There are also no minigames at all, unless you count Vasebreaker, which has been executed very poorly. Just look at the amount of strategy you need for this Vasebreaker level. The game has a very bad habit of always spawning gargantuas at the end of each level. The ways within the level either spawn no zombies at all or they spam a crap ton at you, with no clear pattern whatsoever. Sometimes zombies only spawn in one lane, which almost makes it feel like they want you to use jalapeno in that lane. Squash and Tangle Kelp are currently glitched and don't always kill the zombies they're targeting. Gargantuas die to a singular cherry bomb or jalapeno, but yet he needs 3 squashes to die. Bongcha pretty much outclasses every single plant in the game, so you end up never using anything else when given the choice. Lilypad only costs 0 sun, which means that you can just brainlessly spam him. And when you restart a level too many times because of the unrealistic and random difficulty, you'll lose brains, which means that you will also have to wait another 5 minutes before you can play again. This game also tends to just artificially increase the difficulty of each level. But what do I mean by that? What's the difference between artificial difficulty and a normal difficulty in a PvZ level? Well, the answer is just RNG. After playing countless mods inside of the PvZ community, I realized that PvZ, despite being an all-out RNG game in its core, there's still ways to reduce the overall RNG needed to beat the level. Take the puddles with the unsorted tiles as an example. The puddle will randomly occur in your lawn, and they can even spawn in an inaccessible dirt tile, making the puddle completely useless there for the entirety of your game. This now means that in order to get the advantage you desperately need, you have to be lucky, which is just stupid and doesn't reward skill-based gameplay in the slightest. The same can be said with those Kaizo difficulty levels, where all you get from the game is a nerfed pea shooter because every level is a locked and loaded level. Even the Grapes of Wrath mechanic is completely random and requires a crap ton of RNG. So, to summarize, the level balancing is really off, with some levels being completely useless while others are almost impossible to beat. Most people, including myself, also dislike the new art style, music as well as animation, and it just looks very cheaply made. There isn't a lot of new content to look forward to. The game is way too long and it offers you no variety whatsoever, and lastly, this game lacks any sort of soul that once made PvZ1 such a masterpiece. I'm not even kidding when I'm saying that even fan-made PvZ games do a much greater job at creating an enjoyable and fun gameplay experience. Just to remind you, those are games that make absolutely zero profits. Well, this wraps up my entire rant about PvZ3. I've tried to keep it as fair as possible, and I don't want anyone to be offended over the things I said. I don't want to blame anyone for what's happening right now to PvZ3, but all I know is that this franchise is in a very weird state right now. And remember, there are always 2 sides of a story. I just told you mine. Thank you to AnLee205, to Memory, to BinPVZ, as well as to Booby for being part of our amazing channel members. Also thank you for everyone who stayed until the very end. I guess I will see you on our next PvZ challenge.